Greetings and welcome to Kidney Talks with the GW Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center. MOTEP, the National Minority Organ Tissue and Transplant Education Program, and the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church. I am Jennifer Rigo with the GW Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, filling in for Reverend Kendra Curry with the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church. Today, our presentation will be on healthy living and spirituality. Love yourself, take care of yourself, by one of the pioneers of transplantation, Dr. Clive Callender. Dr. Callender is a current professor of surgery at Howard University College of Medicine. In 1991, Dr. Callender conceptualized and founded National MOTEP for the purpose of increasing minority donation rates nationally. I want to thank you all for joining us on this extremely powerful and impactful presentation in time for the new year. Without further delay, I would like to turn things over to Dr. Callender to begin his presentation. Dr. Callender.
Healthy living and spirituality, love yourself, take care of yourself. This is a topic that is dear to me because this is what life is all about. And the next slide points out how it all begins. First, we don't have any thing to worry about because we have no drugs involved in this presentation. Next is the number one problem in transplantation, which is the shortage of donors. Because of this shortage, 20 people die every single day. Next slide, please. And it all began for me in the late 70s. And by 1982, the data was clear that more than 50% of the national transplant waiting list is minorities, but they only represent 15% of the donor population. And at that time, they represented 25% of the total population. African Americans were thought not likely to donate at all. Next slide points out that how it all began for me in 1978, because the Southeast Oregon Procurement Foundation came to me to ask for my help to solve the donor shortage, and especially why African Americans were reluctant to become donors. The wrinkle was that they had no funds to support my help. So what we did, because we felt the data was so remarkable and that the need was so great, that I met with Dr. James Baton, who's an eminent psychologist, who reviewed the data with me, and we both concluded that we needed to look into the matter and to find out why African Americans are reluctant donors, and why, in spite of the fact that they are the commonest sufferers of end-stage renal disease because of their predilection to hypertension and diabetes, why? And so the next slide points out what we actually started doing. We got $500 from Howard University to survey 40 Washington, D.C. residents. And with that, amazingly, with $500, we were able to find out the 5 reasons Blacks are unwilling to donate, and also to identify ways to overcome their reluctance to donate. It's remarkable that with $500, these days we talk about millions of dollars and all that stuff, but $500 was all we could get, so we decided to take advantage of that. The next slide points out the obstacles, those 5 obstacles to donation that we identified from this study. First is the next slide. Next slide shows that, well, of course, that first we divided people into focus groups for 2-hour sessions. And we asked them questions. Why? Why are Blacks reluctant to become donors? Why don't we become part of the solution to the problem? And based on this, the next slide shows what we identified. That number 1 was the African American population wasn't even aware of the fact that transplant existed. We weren't aware that we needed transplants. Yeah, I know transplants were being done, but What did that have to do with us? We were not aware that we had more hypertension, diabetes than any other ethnic group, and therefore we needed transplants more than any other group. Therefore, we needed to be part of the solution. Next slide points out the second thing we identified: religious myths and misperceptions, uh, suggesting that when you get to the pearly gates, if you don't have your eyes, you don't have your kidneys, you, you won't get into the pearly gates. So if you get there, you won't be able to see grandmama in the hereafter. If you only have one kidney, you only get one wing, and other misperceptions. Forgetting that uh, the Christians believe that Christ came, died, and gave his life that we might have a second chance at life, have eternal life thereafter. And so it is the religious right thing to do to give organs and tissues in life and after death. So this was something that we learned from that. The next slide points out that the third obstacle was fear that if I go to the hospital, they might be more concerned with getting my organs and tissues than with actually saving my life. And we did away with this because we made it clear that there was a law that indicated that people who take care of you and keep you alive have nothing to do with the declaration of your death and nothing to do with organ donation. All they do is work to save your life. The next slide showed the next obstacle, which is basic distrust of the healthcare community. Because, in the past history, we've had minorities and other people, disabled people, used as guinea pigs and experimentation. And so now that we have more people of color in administration, this is no longer something that we need to worry about. We have people who ensure that you can trust us, and that if you go to the hospital, the one thing we're going to do is take care of you and save your life, and not use you as a guinea pig. The laws have been changed so much so that this is no longer an issue. The next obstacle is something that is not a surprise: racism. A concern that if I'm a person of color, they're only going to take my organs and give them to another majority person and not give them to a minority who needs it more than anybody else. And we had to reassure them that actually what happens is that we give the organs to the people who have the best match, regardless of complexion. And this is something that helps us to understand the 5 obstacles that existed and the 5 reasons why minorities were reluctant to become transplant recipients or donors. Next slide points out that look at the waiting list. By the time we started our work in the 80s, we were talking about 16,000. Now we're talking about 120,000 people who are waiting. And we're talking about close to 20 people dying every single day because of the shortage of donors. Next slide, please. And this shows the fact that the national waiting list is over 115,000. And actually last year we did more transplants than we ever did before, did more than 41,000. But still, you're talking about a difference between those who are waiting and those who donate, those who actually have transplants. And the difference is about 60,000. And this is why 20 some people die every single day waiting for organs. The number one problem in transplantation today. The next slide points out that what we did after we got this data together and got all these answers as to why African Americans were reluctant to become donors. And we identified that, amazingly, when we started this focus group, only 1 out of the 40 people was willing to be a donor. But at the end of that study, all 40 had changed their minds and decided they wanted to become part of the donor program. And this said to us that we had the solution to the problem right in our hands. And so we began the DC Organ Donor Program using the National Kidney Foundation and Howard University, and later taking advantage of the Dow Chemical Company that funded us to go across the country to talk about the need for Black donors across the United States. So we went to some 20 cities across the United States talking about the need for Blacks to become part of the solution to this problem. The next slide points out that first, between 1982 and 1980, in the beginning, Black donor card signings increased from 20 a month to 750 per month, just with us going around and talking about having people of color who were recipients, donors, and people waiting, just doing that and educating them about the 5 myths that I just shared with you, caused a tremendous change. As you can see, from 20 per month to 750 per month. Quite interesting, to a group that they said would not donate in the first place. Next slide. In addition, because of the Dow Chemical Company giving us funds to not only go across the United States to 22 cities, but go to the 5 historically Black colleges. We were able to do a Gallup poll between 1985, when we first started, and 1990, when that program completed. And it showed us that there's a tripling of Blacks' awareness of transplantation. And the number of Blacks who signed donor cards had tripled, so that we had done something that people said could not be done. We tripled Black awareness and tripled the number of Blacks signing donor cards. And this to us was momentous. Next slide, please. And I think the thing that was exciting to us was that because of the DC Organ Donor Program we started in DC, and because of the Dow Take Initiative program, hey, this means that if we can get Blacks to donate, we can get other ethnicities to donate. And so we conceptualized MOTEP, the National Minority Organ Tissue Transplant Education Program, to do what was so successful in the African American community and expand that to all ethnicities. And this then is what happened to us, and we conceptualized this in 1991 and actually got our first funds to create MOTEP between 1993 and 2000. The next slide points out what this is all about. It shows us that we use the successful methodology that we use for the Black donors for every ethnic group. Of course, the difference is in the Latino population, we did it in Spanish. For the Asian Pacific Islander community, we did it in whatever language they wanted us to do it in. For the Native Americans, we did it in their convenient language. And so for each of the 5 ethnic groups, we devised special methodologies that took advantage of us going to the community, educating them, and empowering them to become part of the solution. The next slide points out that this actually was in line with our mission statement, which is to reduce the number and rate of ethnic minority Americans needing organs and tissue transplants. This then, of course, is a bold mission statement, but it's something that I'm thrilled to tell you that we were able to accomplish. Next slide, please. And this is what our goal was, to do 2 things: ounce of prevention and intervention, trying to accommodate healthier lifestyles and behavioral patterns, increase the number of minority donors and transplant recipients, increase the number of family discussions regarding organ and tissue transplants, and increase the number of minority donor pledges. And I'm thrilled to tell you that the data that we've accumulated over time indicates that we're able to do all of those things. And this then, of course, is what MOTEP has been all about. The next slide will show you that actually our methodology, because it's one thing to have a desire to do it. It's another thing to actually make it happen. And the next slide will show you exactly uh, what the MOTEP had been doing. We operated, for example, we start off with 3 sites uh, with a small amount of money, and after a year, we built up to 5 sites, and then we got a grant from the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Disease, NIH, that gave us a total of $5 million to go into 16 cities and reached more than 12 million people, including all ethnic groups, going to places like Hawaii, New Mexico, and all across the country, Florida, California. And we utilized culturally sensitive and ethnically similar community volunteers with hands-on involvement in the planning and implementation stages of creative program activities. So what we did that was unique was we went into the community, educated the community, and then let the community take the message. And this then had wonderful results. The next slide kind of helps you understand our 4 strategies that we employed. And at the time, we were in the beginning of most things. And so we were among the first to recognize that the people who were the most effective messengers were the transplant recipients, the donors, the candidates, and their families, along with health professionals. And when you had these people going into the community, this was a very effective strategy. The second strategy, next slide, is to actually have the message to be the same wherever you go, even though it may be in a different language and delivered by culturally similar sensitive messengers. It's still the same message that you give to one group, you give to the others. And this then was the second strategy. The third strategy, next slide, please, was for us to get the community. We learned, therefore, that the most effective way to get things across and to get things changed was let the community be educated and empower to implement community awareness and educational activities and develop their own community action plans. They might be teen health summits, block parties, health Sundays, Dance for Life, or whatever that community felt was a good way to get across the message to the rest of the community. And the fourth strategy was, next slide, please, was a collaboration for anybody who would work with us. And we work with over 300 organizations to make a difference, social, civic, and faith-based organizations. And I must add that that's where we started, with the social and faith-based organizations, transplant centers, transplant-related organizations, OPOs, pharmaceuticals. Anybody would allow us to come and talk to them. That was all part of it. And this then helped us move forward. So the next slide points out that twofold solution, ounce of prevention, talking about preventing the need, and intervention, increasing the number of donors. All of this together was very effective. And next slide, which points out that the need for how we actually did this. Went into the communities, educated, empowered them, let the community develop local MOTEP interventions and strategies, short-term, intermediate, and long-term. And the one thing that we provided, which is on the left side, is the funding. In other words, the funding that we got went to the community, and the community then educated and empowered. And so, yes, we did a lot of the work in terms of brain work, but in terms of what made the difference and made our program so successful was the fact that the community itself did all the work. We provided the model, they did all the work, and the rest is history. We got to the point where African Americans and minorities became the number 1 donors in the United States for a period of 5 years. And that's remarkable for a group which people said would not donate in the first place. The next slide points out the not only the fact that there is a crisis, But this twofold solution made a tremendous difference. And the next slide points out the fact that in 2001, we initiated for the first time Love Yourself, Take Care of Yourself campaign, emphasizing when we go to the communities, we don't just talk about transplant, we talk about how do you stay healthy. And ounce of prevention is really worth a pound of cure. And we practice that and we preach that. And we ask you to do that because we want you to decrease the number of people who actually get end-stage renal disease. And we want you to transplant, become donors and transplant. But we also want not to be the number one group that has more end-stage renal disease than anybody else. So this then was an important giant step forward for us. The next slide points out the categories that we talk about. Diabetes, hypertension, alcohol, substance abuse, poor nutrition and lack of exercise, obesity. All of these are the diseases and behaviors that lead to the need for transplantation in the first place. So ways of decreasing the incidence of all of these becomes a way to decrease the need for transplantation, while at the same time addressing the need for donors and also having recipients and donors take the message to the community. The next slide talks about the fact that as a consequence of our $5 million grant that we got for the first 16 cities, we then got a grant to identify why we have so much end-stage renal disease in the minority community. And one of the things we learned was what came out of this grant was the Be Blessed model, which is a biopsychosocial and spiritual conceptual framework of health and wellness. Alfonso Campbell was our lead psychologist, and he, while Dr. Baton helped us at the beginning, it was Dr. Campbell who helped us at this stage to take the work forward. Between 2000 and 2010, we then worked on this so-called Be Blessed model. Love yourself, take care of yourself, and apply spirituality to the framework of health and wellness. Next slide, please. It's interesting to appreciate that the World Health Organization in 1946 defined good health as a state of complete physical, social, and mental well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. This then, the next slide points out that this then was something for us to recognize. But what was important for us to also understand is that we had moved from the Eastern model, which we'll show later, to the Western model, which figured that disease is an affliction of the body and is solely ill because of disturbances in physiological and biochemical imbalances. And we are proposing that that is not the case, and that the next slide points out that later on, people thought it was the biopsychosocial model of health, that interaction between psychosocial and biomedical factors were important. And yes, they are important, but that's not the end of the story. That's part of the story. And the next slide points out that next was somebody who suggested that the biopsychosocial, spiritual model of health is what was important. Now, I must remind you that this is something that was evolved in 2000, forgetting that 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, the Egyptians had long determined that spirituality was an important part of a health model. And so that in many ways, the Western style didn't take advantage of what the Eastern had produced. Next slide, please. And the next slide points out that 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, the Eastern people, the Egyptians, had identified that spirituality is a major part of the healing process. And so in many ways, we've gone backwards in terms of eliminating spirituality in the model. And what we are doing with the Be Blessed model is bringing back spirituality from the east to the west, and now including spirituality as one of the underpinnings of disease. Furthermore, we're alleging that of all the components that we talk about, spirituality may be the most important. All of the 9 components of the Be Blessed model that we're going to share with you are important. But the one that may be more important than any of the others is spirituality. The next slide actually points out our major premise of the study, that health outcomes are determined by the interplay of activities across several biopsychosocial spiritual domains. The next slide will point out that the Be Blessed domains, and the next slide identifies all 9 of them: biology, environment, beliefs, lifestyle, experiences, spirituality, stress, emotions, and desires. The next slide goes into the B of the Be Blessed model: biology, genetics, immune, and all parts of the biology of the human body. And that's all important, but it's not alone. It's one of the components one of the 9 components that is important. Environment, the role of the air you breathe, the food you eat, all of those things, the social culture, the ability to have food, not to have food deserts, not to have McDonald's and those places being the only place you can get food, but having healthy food choices, living in a sensible environment that is healthy. That is important as well. And so these are 2 of the 9 elements that are important. Next is B. Next slide points out the third, and it's beliefs. Your own thoughts, ideas, your positive attitude, your self-esteem, your self-identity. All of these, whether you're self-reflective, whether you are optimistic or pessimistic, all of this determines whether you're healthy or not. And then the L, the next slide, which is lifestyle. Your health habits, your behaviors, diet, nutrition, sleep. We often forget that you need to have at least 7 to 9 hours every night, that you have to exercise 150 minutes every week, minimally. Now, it doesn't hurt to double that, but you should do no less than 150 minutes every week. Avoid alcohol and drugs where possible. Eliminate smoking. Avoid addictions of all types. So that's the L in the fourth of the 9 elements of the Be Blessed model. Next is, of course, experiences. Our experience, whether they're positive or negative, reward and punishment history, stress, pleasant experiences, hassles. These experiences determine your fate in life, and I think it's important to be able to de-stress, and we'll talk more about that later. The next slide talks about the S, spirituality, which we believe transcends all. And of all of the 9 elements of the Be Blessed model, we feel that spirituality is transcendent. And we talk about the attributes of the human spirit being kindness, trust, empathy, compassion, love, friendship, hope, virtue, justice, devotion, and freedom, all part of the spirituality, the realm of spirituality. May have some more comments about this at the end. And the second S, next slide, tells us about the importance of stress. We mentioned stress, and I don't think we can overemphasize the role that stress plays in the perceived discrepancy between the physical or psychological demands and the available resources. And what is so important about stress is the ability to not let other people's problems become your problem to the extent that you are stressed out about it. You have to learn how to be able to understand that if issues are brought to bear, that change the things you can and accept those that you can't, and try to know the difference between the two. And so, stress is among those that are most premier in terms of learning how to de-stress. And then the eighth one is the next slide, please. Is emotions, and of course, positive and negative emotions. The positive that lead to good health, happiness, joy, delight, excitement, love, satisfaction, gratitude, uh, forgiveness, those kinds of things. These are the things that make you healthy. The things that lead to ill health, though, are hostility, anger, worry, sadness, depression, loneliness, guilt, shame, hatred, resentment, grief, embarrassment, those kinds of negative things, so that your emotions play a major role in your health. And then, of course, after emotions is the part of it that we sometimes don't want to talk about, which is the next slide, which is the desires, uh, the need state, what you want, whether you need them or not, what you want, food, what kind of food, sex, how often, thirst, air, sleep, physical activity, safety, and people of color who are paranoid. Uh, Maybe it's healthy paranoia, but we have to be aware of who's in authority and who's not, and how to accept our role in life, and also to how to be a good companion, and so our desires help us help frame our healthiness. So these are the 9 components of the Be Blessed model. And one of the things we did with this model was apply it to to use it in the churches and to educate using Bible verses to understand the proposed biopsychosocial spiritual conceptual framework of health that has been derived from findings in our empirical study. And what we did in our study, we had 207 African Americans that we studied. We did their blood pressures, we did their weight, we did their blood work. We looked at the cholesterol and the lipid levels and the interleukin levels, and identified that these all played a role in the psychological state of stress and health. And the next slide points out that these 9 elements are important. And when we looked at obesity, one of the things that surprised us in that study was that the inflammation biomarkers, the lipids and the indices of cardiovascular function were elevated creatinine levels, elevated norepinephrine, blood pressure elevated, and other correlates of ill health, said to us that health is something that is complex, and these 9 elements are important to address in order to stay healthy. The next slide also looks at the other elements that we looked in the blood work. The cholesterol levels, the HDL, which is thought of as the good cholesterol, the triglycerides, the LDL, which is thought of as the bad cholesterol. All of these related to cognitive processes and to spiritual issues. And so it's not only the biological that's important, it's the psychological, and it's the religious and other aspects of it, the cardiovascular functions as well, as we looked at the blood pressure, and we looked at the weight, and we looked at the glomerular filtration rates. And all of those helped us to understand that being healthy is more than just one element, but it's a combination of the 9 elements that we've discussed. The next slide points out in conclusion in many ways. We identified that the indices of self-related health positivity related to objective clinical indices. In other words, those who were positive had good objective clinical findings. Those who were negative had more inflammatory biomarkers and had negative aspects. Uh, Intrinsic religiosity, meaning that if you really were serious about your religion, this was positively related to mental health. And this has been correlated with cancer and many other illnesses, so that religiosity is beneficial and spirituality is beneficial. Next, I think that is the last slide. And oh no, this is, of course, this is the last slide. But this is something that was remarkable to us, that if you are able to forgive, this is positively related to positive things. If you are unable to forgive, here again, I'll emphasize this. If you're unable to forgive, this is related to increasing your blood pressure, increasing anger, increasing depression. And if you were stressed by racism, this related to the blood levels of cortisol. And so we are clear now that love and spirituality play the major role in your health. And so as we look at transplantation and many things that we've been able to accomplish, one of the most important things we were able to accomplish is to recognize the correlation between healthiness, spirituality, and all of the 9 aspects of the Be Blessed model. Thank you for the opportunity to share my life experience with you relative to the many aspects of transplantation. No less important, this is not the slide that we want to have. You can eliminate that one. Anyway, the floor is now open for any questions on any part of this presentation that you would like to ask me about.
Dr. Callender, thank you so much for that extremely comprehensive, informative, and somewhat alarming, all in a good way, presentation to remind us all that there's so much that we can control in terms of our health and some that we can't, which actually brings me to this question that Beverly Williams has posed while you were presenting. Can kidney disease be genetic?
Absolutely. And one things that I was bothered at recently was that there was a study that looked at the genetic causes of kidney disease, and there are many. But the problem with that study was that about 3% of the study involved the minority population. And so we need to study more people in our ethnic groups because, yes, there are many diseases, kidney disease, that are genetic. And one of the things that I would mention, the Ron Joy Paul Foundation has been working with us to do kidney screens. And one of the things that we know is that if your GFR, glomerular filtration rate, is low, then you need to have studies to find out whether you have a genetic cause of kidney disease. Not only can kidney disease be genetic, we know that there are certain gene types that specifically cause FSGS, which is a type of kidney disease that is associated with a specific gene that is related to the elimination of sleeping sickness in Africa. And this same gene that eliminates sleeping sickness in Africa is the same gene that predisposes us to have more kidney disease in the African American population. And so we know that there are a number of diseases. So once you have a kidney screen and you find out that your glomerular filtration rate is not what is normal, then one of the things that you can do is get genetic testing to try to find out whether or not the disease you have is garden variety like hypertension, diabetes, or obesity, or if it's actually a genetic disease. And if it's a genetic disease, there's a possibility of treating it. And this is information that you need to know. Is it just garden variety hypertension? Is it just garden variety diabetes? Or is it something else? And the answer is it can be something else, but it requires genetic testing to identify.
Thank you, Dr. Callinger, for that thorough answer to Beverly's question. For those of us who may be joining us in mid-presentation, we are talking about healthy living and spirituality. Love yourself, take care of yourself with Dr. Clive Callinger. This presentation, I think, is very timely as we begin a new year, and many of us tend to make New Year's resolutions. But as someone recently just said, more just awareness of some of our habits in order to really truly be successful at some change that maybe we want to implement. But there's so much that strikes me about this presentation, and I've heard it several times, and I learned something new every single time. Is that spirituality plays such an important part of one's health and wellness and calmness, and also can affect how we perceive the world and how we interact with others. And I know we did this presentation while COVID was going on, right? While Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd movement was going on, and how you indicated that racism is such a stress inducer, and so I know that all those issues unfortunately still exist in today's society. COVID is not gone. We have obviously shots and boosters and preventions that are in place. As we see, racism is not gone, unfortunately. And with Martin Luther King's remembrance on Monday. But I say all this because you are someone that leads by example. And I know the audience members don't know you personally, but you practice literally what you preach, which is why you are where you are today in impeccable health at your age. How do you, as busy as you are, make time to take care of yourself with whether it's meditation, taking time out, going for a walk? How do you keep this on top of mind to ensure that you remain as healthy as possible and practice medicine in your current day, every day, your daily lifestyle?
Well, I can only say this to you that I'm not in impeccable health, but I'm 86 years of age, and I have a sound mind and pain-free. So I'm blessed, the gift of God. But to answer your question more directly, I start off my day by doing an hour of walking. I've learned through the years, and being a doctor is not a particularly healthy lifestyle that you learn. But over time, I've learned that after you get past the age of 40, exercise is mandatory, not optional. It's mandatory. And though they talk about 150 minutes a week, that's the low side of it. I think, I try to do at least 300 to 450 a week. And then, of course, trying to understand that there are healthy foods and other things that go along. But before I get to that, I must add that I sometimes underestimate the amount of time I spend in meditation. And we don't talk that much about it in the Be Blessed model, but actually in the Be Blessed model, we talk about the fact that we need to go over the Bible and read scripture. But meditation I spend probably more time meditating than I do exercising. But I think it should be at least, you should spend as much time meditating as you do exercising. I realize, and I think it's important to understand while we talk about spirituality, good health is often the gift of God. We all have different genetic patterns, but we also uh, need to know that that good health depends upon you also having, in addition to the exercise and the meditation, to recognize that you have to learn how to forgive, love, and forgive, and also to uh, be able to not be stressed by everything. Uh, one of the uh, things I've learned in life is to try to keep other people's issues from affecting your ability to stay calm, cool, and collective. And then that simple uh, phrase that we often use: change the things you can, and learn to know the difference between the things you can change and things you can't change, and accept the difference. That's easy to say. It isn't so hard to do. It's not so hard. It's not so easy to. It's not. It's easy to say, but it's not so easy to do sometimes. But I think this is a critical aspect of how you deal with de-stressing things. Yes, we have a complexion that causes people to put us down and treat us with disrespect, but that doesn't mean we need to accept it. One of the things that I also learned in life is that there's I don't believe that there's anything such as destructive criticism. We talk about constructive and destructive criticism. But in my life, any criticism you want to give me, I consider constructive. And my advice to you is do that. Don't let anybody put you down. If they give you a destructive criticism, try to find out what about that you can use to help you become the best person that you can be. And I think those are some of the things that I've learned through my 86 years of life. And I believe God has gifted me to be able to make it this long, in my opinion, in spite of me. And not because of me, but in spite of me. And I've learned a lot of lessons that I'm sharing with you right now.
They are extremely wise words, and I will definitely try to live by them longer than I did the last time I heard this presentation. Dr. Callender and audience members, please feel free to type in your questions for Dr. Callender. We've talked about spirituality. We've talked about the importance of exercise, and also how genetics tie also back into kidney disease. But diet, right? Diet is so incredibly important. I've heard two people now since the new year tell me that they've made so many different lifestyle changes, and one of them is, really cutting out all forms of alcohol and sugar and focusing on more fruits, vegetables, fish, and grains and fiber. And the more research that comes out, the more we hear about that this is really the most healthiest diet and again, it's not a diet, right? It's a way of life. It's a lifestyle. And I know with everyone being so busy in today's society, people tend to eat out or they order in. So it's hard sometimes to make healthy choices, but you can do it if you're disciplined. So curious as to, Dr. Callender, how you incorporate healthy eating habits, because I know you do. And then if there's any advice that you could give to others about how to do so.
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head when you indicated that one of the things that as we talk about nutrition, one of the things that you have to realize, it isn't that the meat is bad for you. It's the processing of the meat that is the problem. And so if you were to avoid meat, you'd be doing yourself a great favor. If you were to cut back on the amount of sugar, although I haven't been able to get free of that addiction either. But we know now that sugar it tastes great, but too much of it is lethal. But I think if you had a diet that was plant-based, and even fish based and fruit and vegetables. I think that would help you live an extra 10 years perhaps. And so that's a health style change that would be desirable. If you incorporated the dietary changes that you mentioned, fruits, vegetables, and uh, fish, if you can do it, and minimize the red meats. I think that combined with all the other things we discussed would help you live longer, and then not only live longer, but have a quality of life as you live longer. So that I think we mentioned many of the things that really make a difference. Eating a lot of fruit, eating a lot of vegetables. Uh, the plant-based diet is something that is a lifestyle change that will help you in the short run and the long run.
Yes, 100% what you said. And also what astonishes me is how much salt is in so many different foods that you wouldn't even know, right? Um, and how important it is to really and truly know what someone is putting in your food or know what your food is being cooked with, as well as reading labels. Because the amount of salt content in some canned as well as frozen foods, as well as just items that what did someone say, that are in the inner aisles of the grocery store. The outer aisles are always the best, but it just astonishes me because we have such an epidemic, if you will, of hypertension, and how that is such a precursor to so many different diseases like kidney disease, right? We For those of you who may not know, when we do in the community, we test for kidney disease. We're also testing your blood pressure, because if you do happen to have kidney disease and you have hypertension, the first thing we encourage you to do is get your hypertension under control. So I say all this because you may think sometimes you're making healthy choices, and there are hidden salt content that's pretty high in some of the food that you are ingesting.
And I think one of the best advices that one can give is what you mentioned already, which is if you ideally were to eat at home and eat out in restaurants as little as possible, because there's much more salt and much more sugar in all the food that we eat. And so you can minimize that by cooking your own food. And so you should probably make the restaurant visits as infrequent as possible. But some people, that's not possible because they work and they don't have time. But every store you go to, a restaurant, look, even at McDonald's, they have healthy choices. It's just that we don't take advantage of some of those healthy choices. It's not that McDonald's doesn't have healthy choices. It's that we take the choices that we're used that taste the best for us, and sometimes those are the choices that lead to our demise.
Well said. Do we have any questions from the audience? If so, please feel free to put them in the chat. If not, I'm going to talk about this because I do think it's also instrumental in our health. How often, Dr. Calendar, should an individual go to the doctor?
Well, I think going to the doctor at least once or twice a year is important, especially as you age. But one of the things that we need to do that sometimes we don't talk enough about, you should have your own sphygmomanometer, and you should be taking your blood pressure at least once or twice a year yourself. And understand that sometimes when you go to the doctor, the blood pressure that is your best blood pressure is the blood pressure that you take yourself at home. And so, but a minimum of once or twice a year. And one of the things that is important is that when you go to the doctor, be sure you get a urine protein test to see if you have any protein in your urine, because that will tell you whether or not you may be developing kidney disease, because the first sign of kidney disease is increased urine protein. That's one of the things that I would say to you as you go to your doctor. Be sure, and if you find you have protein in the urine, don't accept the comment that we'll watch it. No, you need to know exactly what it is, and if you continue to have protein in your urine, you need to go to see a kidney specialist so they can identify what is the cause of the kidney disease and how they can treat it, whether it needs to have the diabetes and the blood sugar controlled, or the high blood pressure controlled, or the weight controlled, whatever. These are issues. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the dietary aspect of it in terms of the salt, because we have many studies that demonstrate that our ethnic group is very salt sensitive. And this then is a cause of hypertension for some. And then, of course, we have so much diabetes, which is the number one cause of kidney disease. Hypertension is number two, but diabetes is number one. And so if you have diabetes, losing weight and exercising and doing those other things we talk about, and changing your diet and doing exercise and meditation, all of those things contribute to your health. And then don't forget your mental health. This de-stressing and not letting our complexions be a source of trouble for us. Try to understand that we are what we are, and we're great at what we have, and make the most of it, and not let people put you down. If they try to put you down, make it constructive, and don't let them stress you, because that's what is painful about institutionalized racism, is that it stresses people, and the stress is not good for your health.
Thank you, Dr. Callender, for this, as Reverend Curry would have called it, amazing presentation. I also want to just point out to the audience members, because you just mentioned mental health and how critically important it is for our overall well-being. We will have a presentation on mental health and the importance of it on our next webinar, which will be on Friday, January 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And so I encourage everyone to tune in, where we will have a psychiatrist talk about the importance of mental health in all aspects of everyone's life, because it transcends into so much more of your overall health and wellness. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. It was an absolute pleasure to hear from Dr. Clive Callender, who is truly, as one of my colleagues like to say, Dr. Melanson, the godfather of transplant, but he's done so much more with that. And that's quite obvious in his presentation, his push for, to dispel myths among minorities for donation, and how incredibly impactful it's been. His work is tied to more donations among African Americans, and also the fact that, as he pointed out, that African Americans are unfortunately predisposed to kidney disease. So the more we're aware of what to look for, and some preventive measures, like going to the doctor, like getting your urine checked for protein, like being aware of what is your GFR level when your blood is drawn, when you go to the doctor, and to listen and to be an advocate for your own health. And then if there's any stage of kidney disease, whether it's 1, 2, 3, it could be reversed, and see a nephrologist. And 4 and 5 is more end-stage renal disease, which leads to dialysis and transplantations. And we have presentations on those stages. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. I want to thank Dr. Callender for his amazing words and words to live by. My goodness, forgiveness is what I'm going to take away from this presentation. I want to wish you all a wonderful 2023. Stay blessed and be well, and we will see you Friday, January 27th.